So next, I'd like to call the Mr. Chris Nagel. He works for the. He is the director of the Department of Transport and Main Roads, Queensland, Australia. His presentation title is the Disaster Management in Queensland.
Okay, well, just while that's being loaded up, I'll just introduce myself. And as Yukio said, my name's Chris Nagel. I work for the Queensland Department of Transport and Main Roads, and I have responsibility for recovery of roads after natural disasters and for road maintenance and repair. I'm enjoying your beautiful city and have been appreciating some of the amazing scenery and your city life here. Okay. Next one? Yep.
Next one.
Okay, so just a little bit about us. Queensland's land mass is about 1,853 million kilometres, which is about 2.5 times the size of Chile, but our population is only about 1/4 of Chile. So we have a lot of land, but not much population. What that means for us is that we have long lengths of road, and to reach the far extremities of our state, we have many roads. So at a state control level, so this is not local roads, these are the major roads, we have 33,352 kilometres of roads and 3,056 bridges. So today I'll talk about our approach to disaster management. I'll talk about the structure of disaster management in Queensland, how we manage that. I'll talk about the recovery phase and our approach to recovering our roads after we've had a disaster. Also building for resilience and pre-disaster planning and preparation. Natural disasters that Australia experiences are cyclones, flooding, thunderstorms, earthquakes and bushfires. We don't have very many earthquakes, nothing like we have in Chile and Japan, but we do have a few small earthquakes. So the focus of this presentation is on Queensland because Queensland is the state that experiences the most natural disasters of the Australian states. Since 2010, Queensland has been impacted by more than 50 significant natural disasters, events, resulting in tragic loss of life and more than $14 billion in damage to public infrastructure. So just to put that in Chilean pesos, that's 6,667 million Chilean pesos, or about $11 billion US. Next slide. Yep. Okay, so our approach in Australia to disaster management, we had 4 phases. I think these are familiar to many. It's prevention, preparedness, response and recovery. In the prevention phase, we aim to eliminate or reduce the exposure to and reduce the impact of a hazard on communities at risk. We do this by looking at our construction standards and particularly looking at some of the new technologies that are coming in around resilient pavements. The big issue for us is flooding, and we've been working with resilient pavements to improve our preparation for flood events. Our second area is in the area of preparedness, and these are activities to support individuals and communities and businesses to get ready for an event. And we have disaster and risk management plans and contingency plans and continuity plans in place for each of our areas. The third area is to respond. I'll talk in this a little bit more detail a bit later in the presentation. But basically in the response phase we look at making the roads safe, we inspect for damage, assess the damage, and we undertake any short-term repairs. Then in the next phase, which is the recovery phase, that's a coordinated process supporting affected individuals and communities in the reconstruction of physical infrastructure, restoration of the economy and the environment, and support for the emotional, social and physical well-being of those affected. So governments at all levels have a role in strengthening the nation's resilience to disasters by implementing effective risk-based land management planning strategies and effective arrangements in place to inform people how to assess risks and reduce their exposure. Next one. This slide here might be a little bit difficult for you to read from that section, but it's basically a pyramid. The top triangle is represents our people on the ground that are actually dealing with the emergency at the local level. At the lowest level we have our national government, and between that we have the various levels of government. So the diagram is described that way because the role of national government is to support the people who are working at the front line dealing with the emergency. So in that top triangle is our local disaster management groups. We have 73 of them across the state. Supporting them is district disaster management groups, and they support them with information management, communications and reporting. And then we have a single state disaster management group, and they look at strategic resourcing, strategic coordination and statewide planning. So communication travels up and down between these groups, and the people at the top of the pyramid, people who are dealing with the emergency, are the ones then who are describing what resources they need, how well they are coping, and any additional information they need that will be helpful in terms of providing support. I'll click through the next couple of slides, thanks. Yeah, keep going, keep going, keep going, keep going. Yep. Okay. I'll now speak about the recovery phase. You may not see it very clearly, but this photograph here is of the entrance to one of our cities called Rockhampton. And either side of that picture of a big bull, it's the beef capital of Australia, is the major roads entering into this city. So you can see that they're all underwater, and when we flood in Queensland, our floods extend for as far as the eye can see. And some roads can be underwater for 5 or 6 weeks before the floodwaters dissipate. So in our recovery phase, our objectives are value for money. So we look after a major event, we establish a program of coordinated works. We're keen to look at timely completion. We want to get the economy moving again as soon as possible. And then also looking at immunity and resilience, faster recovery and less damage. So in our program of works, which is the area which I'm responsible for, we're really looking for value for money, demonstrated best use of the taxpayers' money. And we have a program of works to establish that. We also need to establish the eligibility of the works to ensure the works meet the requirements set out in funding arrangements, and also the timely completion of the works. And while we're there, looking at immunity and resilience, and where possible we engage with complementary funding to improve the road that was damaged, so that next time we have a flood event, particularly a flood event, we won't be receiving as much damage. Next slide. Our process goes through a number of stages. So when an event happens, we have an activation, and that means that those committees that I described before in the pyramid slide, they are actually then brought together to manage the event. The activation is based on the severity of the event and the damage. And then after the event, there is emergent work. So immediately after the event, there's undertaking of temporary repairs to return the road network to a safe and trafficable condition. And then we commence our reconstruction works. So after the damage has been fully assessed, the work scoped, we then put in a process where we begin to reconstruct the projects, and we prioritise them to get the network operational as soon as possible, and we focus on the strategic road links. I'll just skip the next photo. Okay. Yep. Okay, so we have a process for our planning and delivery of our reconstruction projects. As I said, we have our temporary repairs. They're completed within 60 days. We then scope out the works that need to be completed. We undertake investigations and the planning and design for the new infrastructure that needs to be put in place. Typically that takes us 2 to 3 years normally, but in an emergency situation we compress that to about 6 to 12 months. We then put the projects out to tender, and all tasks are completed within two years. So the plan is to get the community access back as quickly as possible, and that might even be in a restricted sense, but then we embark on a complete reconstruction of the network. Next slide. Next slide. Funding. This is something that's important to every road agency. As I mentioned those numbers before, there's a lot of money involved, and understanding where the funding is going to come from and what is going to be eligible for funding is very important. So we have a process where we scope the works, we put them to tender, we have variations and we have our completion. So through that process we are verifying continually that the works are eligible and are eligible for the funding that is available. Next slide, a little touch on building for resilience. Within that funding we can access what we call complementary works funding. So this is not to put the road back to exactly how it was, but actually to put it back to a higher standard than it previously was at. And in some cases that that work can be undertaken during that recovery phase, so that the new road that's put back is more resilient and can withstand future events. Next slide. Every season we have a planning and preparedness phase. So this is where we engage with key stakeholders and discuss how prepared we are for each of these events. So the committees that I mentioned before would meet together and they would review their emergency plans, their continuity plans, make sure that they're up to date and make sure that everybody who is involved is aware of what is required. So we have annual pre-season planning and preparedness and focusing on our business continuity and disruptive event management. Lastly, I'll just speak a little bit about community awareness and education. This is a television campaign that we run, and it's really educating the public about the dangers of events. We have quite a loss of life each year from people driving into flooded waters and getting washed away. So we have a campaign. First of all, it's called the Get Ready Queensland campaign because we do have a monsoonal climate. So we have a campaign which says get ready Queensland, so people can actually secure their buildings and their houses. The local authorities look at what they need to do in terms of upgrading their drainage maintenance and engaging with communities to help them better prepare for the storm season. This includes disaster preparedness seminars, business continuity planning, information sessions and emergency services expo. Next slide. That's I'm not sure what the translation is, but in English it says, if it is flooded, forget it. And this is a television campaign that we have that aims to prepare people to not drive through flooded waters. A lot of loss of life is that people think they can traverse the flooded waters, but then they fail to realise that underneath the water the road could be washed out. And as I said before, we have lots of loss of life. We had 5 people die in flash flooding in southeast Queensland just a couple of years ago. So the government runs these community campaigns around if it's flooded, forget it. So that's an example of community education. Okay, so thank you for the opportunity to speak today, and also for your hospitality and for the opportunity to visit your country. Thank you.